Welcome. Um, my name is Olajide Olagunju, and I'm the author of How to Resolve a Conflict, which is the book right in front of you. I'm be sharing with you a lecture series titled How to Resolve a Conflict, and the book in front of you will guide us in our discussions. My hope is that as you go along, your skills for effective conflict resolution, both at home and at work, will be sharpened. I invite you to contribute to the lectures by making posts as we go along. Make your contributions, your view, your review, your criticisms. They'll be very useful. Welcome to the lecture series on how to resolve a conflict. This is lecture number 1. I will, as I said, be guided by my book, How to Resolve a Conflict. I like a quote here at the beginning of the book by the poet Milton. The title of his work is Aeropagitica. So let me quote him. Quote, "For this is not liberty, that no grievance should arise, but when complaints are freely heard, deeply considered, and quickly reformed, then is the utmost bound of civil liberty that wise men look for." So what Milton basically is saying is that we should not fret about conflicts. What we should be concerned about is how they are resolved, how effectively they are resolved. And so this lecture series deals with that very important point. How do we resolve our conflict at home, in business, in politics? How do we resolve them effectively? So that's what this lecture series is about. I will now go on to the first part of the lecture, which is to acknowledge people who have inspired me, in my work as a mediator, as a mediation teacher, as an advocate of effective conflict resolution. I'll quickly mention them. And first, I'd like to mention Von J. Christiansen. He wrote Ritual and Resolution, the role of reconciliation in the mediation process, lessons from a traditional Chinese village. Now, Christiansen opened my eyes to the idea of introspection, which is embedded in caucusing. I will discuss caucusing as we go along. Christiansen also revealed local practices of conflict resolution. He was talking about the traditional Chinese village, but I know in India, in Germany, in Nigeria, everywhere, in America, in several places, there are ancient traditional practice of conflict resolution. And I think if you can crunch them, if you can try and summarize them, I think they lean towards amicable resolution of conflicts. I know that we've moved generally away from that, and we're now rushing to the courts, to arbitration, which is like a court, like a private court. But it's very important for us to begin. I think we are doing that globally. What are the other avenue for conflict resolution that build relationship as opposed to destroying them? And this way, mediation is, I think, king. Let me quickly also mention another person that has inspired me. Swami Krishnapada, who wrote Resolving Conflict for the Benefit of All. Now, this author convinced me of the need to stress conflict resolution rather than conflict management. So what we should be doing is resolving conflict, not just managing them. Well, I guess I could say that while we emphasize resolution as opposed to management, is that resolution helps us to really go to the depth of the conflict and resolve it holistically. Whereas just managing the conflict, it could be peripheral. And if we manage conflict or resolve conflict peripherally, it will come up again. And so we don't want to be managing conflict perpetually. My old friend, Kennedy, I know, who created the Lagos Multi-Door Courthouse, also told me about Henry Kissinger's two expressions. One is mediators, gravitas, and the other is shuttle diplomacy. I'll talk about them as we go on when we are talking about the role and duty of the mediator. And of course, shuttle diplomacy when we're talking about forum for effective conflict resolution. I've also drawn great inspiration from Ambassador John MacDonald and Dr. Louis Diamond's groundbreaking work titled Multi-Track Diplomacy. I've summarized their work in chapter 9. So when we get there, we'll discuss them in more detail. I'm also grateful to A.C. Ackland, who wrote the mediation classic titled A Sudden Outbreak of Common Sense. And that was my own starting point back a quarter of a century ago in my starting point in mediation. And a lot of my work is heavily influenced by, and this book inclusive, is heavily influenced by A.C. Ackland's own work. I've also been privileged to contribute to the process of conflict resolution. My true contributions are the 10-step mediation, and the second one, the 7 secrets of effective conflict resolution. Now, the 10-step mediation, it's very good as a guide for the mediator. So if you use the 10-step mediation, you are able to ensure you cover all that you need to cover. So it's a checklist. I sometimes call 10-step mediation a checklist. But actually, with the 10-step mediation, you could effectively resolve a conflict from beginning to the end. However, with the 7 secrets of effective conflict resolution, I expanded the 10-step mediation. So the 10-step mediation becomes just one part of the 7 ways of looking at effective conflict resolution. In chapter 6, you will see my discussion of 10-step mediation, and we'll get there as we go along in this lecture series. In chapter 10, we'll discuss the 7 secrets of effective conflict resolution. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to contribute those 2 ideas to effective conflict resolution and mediation. I strongly believe that the future of conflict resolution is in integrative negotiation. And I strongly believe that as we learn more, we begin to be able to resolve our conflict directly between the parties directly. But in the meantime, we will continue to need a mediator who facilitates the process of integrative negotiation. I'd like to run through the content of the book that we're using for this lecture series. There are 10 chapters, 2 appendices, and of course the bibliography. Chapter 1 is what is wrong with conflict. Chapter 2 is what is mediation. Chapter 3 is why not violence and litigation. Chapter 4 is when mediation works. Chapter 5 is mediation the mediation process. Chapter 6 is the 10-step mediation. Chapter 7, mediators' skills and duties. Chapter 8, institutionalizing mediation. Chapter 9, multi-track diplomacy. Chapter 10, the 7 secrets of effective conflict resolution. And then we have the Appendix A, which is mediation exercises, where I have some case studies, about 4 case studies that you can try your hand on as we go along to test how much you are learning. Of course, I also expect you to be applying the skills we are learning to real life conflict in your own life, at home and at work, and in your businesses, in your practice, in government. Appendix B is the model mediation rules. So a set of rules that guide the mediation process. It's important, especially for formal official mediation, because sometimes it's required that you show some agencies of government, the courts, and so on, what rules you apply to your mediation. So it would be nice when you are writing your mediation agreement to mediate, to include in this and in it in your mediation rules. And you are free to, of course, use the model mediation rules in Appendix B. Then, lastly, we have the bibliography. I think that we can stop there for now, and then we'll continue the next lecture. Thank you very much. I expect you to please remember to make your post and contributions.